I like how you say that with a little wry smile. Look, it's great to have you on the show. We wanted to talk to you about how real-time commodity intelligence could potentially improve operational control, financial confidence, and emissions performance in hard asset industries. But before we dig into that in detail, tell us a little bit about VERIDAPT. Did I pronounce that right?
You pronounce it right. Yeah, look, thanks for having me on the show, and great to be here. I'm the CEO. My name's David Thambiratnam. I'm the CEO at a company called VERIDAPT. We're an Australian-based mining technologies company that has the lucky fortune or misfortune to help our customers around the world manage their fuel inventories. So most of our customers are customers that have got large mobile fleets that use fuel, either diesel or petrol or electricity these days. And what they need to do is be able to manage this. These are critical to their operations. They can never run out 24/7. So they need to know how much they've got. Where is it? Do I need to pay somebody for it? Do I have enough? Who took it? When? Why? And really manage it all, because it's often their second largest expense. So what we're really doing is helping them manage theft and fraud, report on the availability, manage their procurement, handle their safety, report on their emissions, that kind of thing.
So as companies like do this stuff and they do it globally, I mean, I think this is a uniquely global business. So some of it's local for sure. How are they approaching real-time visibility and then some sort of intelligent decision making around that visibility, particularly in a world where artificial intelligence is becoming more and more ubiquitous?
Yeah. Look, I think for a long time, the physical world of commodities has suffered from a lack of visibility because, fundamentally, the way most commodities worlds work is you send somebody out once a month to take a look and see what's there. You put a dipstick in a tank, or fly a drone over a stockpile, or it's a physical activity you've got to do. And so that difficulty of digitizing and having transparency means that people are used to having holes in the data. You loaded your ship with cargo, and you know that 30 days later it arrived at a destination with hopefully the same cargo, and between those 2 points you don't know what happens. And so the world of commodities is very used to patchy, holy data, mainly due to a lack of sensors and cost-effective ways of getting that information.
So that's what I was going to ask you, is like, why are not these massive, and let's just use oil tankers again as a proxy for every other way that these commodities and every other mechanism by which they're being transported, like, why are there not more sensors or IoT devices on there so that, like, do you know what I mean? When you've, again, put the oil into the big tank, that it's there the entire time. You know what temperature it is. You know what the wave structure is like out in the ocean, because that can impact the way this stuff gets. Do you know what I mean? And also, like, I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole, but like, this could impact the way insurance gets priced for this stuff. Maybe we can cover that at the end. But there's so many little nuances here. Is it just too expensive to retrofit everything, or why is there not better data on this stuff in 2026?
It's possible. Everything's possible these days. It's a question of aging fleets and the cost of retrofitting sensors in there. So putting sensors in tanks can be a costly thing if you have to empty the tank, especially if it's a working asset. So that can be one challenge to it. The real reason comes down to change. If you don't need to change things, why would you change it? And so a lot of times the world of commodities has kind of worked a certain way. You get a BOL at the start of your voyage, you load your oil on there. It's assumed that it's there. It's assumed that when it gets to the other end, it'll be still there. It hasn't been tampered with or contaminated with. The world's just worked that way for a long time and is used to it. Right. Pricing, risk, insurance, financing's all built around those metrics. So interestingly, our company, we are owned by a commodities bank, Macquarie Bank, and they do a lot of commodities financing. And what they've used us for is they'll say, hey, we're financing a cargo, or we're financing, $500 million worth of inventory sitting somewhere. And for us to have comfort, we want eyes on. And so they'll put our tech out there. And so sometimes financiers or insurers will actually want that visibility. We've done transactions where, inventories are stored in unusual locations or maybe unsold locations. And in those scenarios, or where it's hard to send an inspector out, tech like this gets deployed for the purpose of satisfying the covenants or the insurer's risk.
Can we back up a little bit, if you don't mind?
Of course.
So many industries have gone through digital transformation, a term that I haven't actually used in a while. But part of that digital transformation is making sure, and I think you've alluded to this as well, is that the data structures that you have in place to understand what your inventory is, whether it's in commodities or frankly in like tires, like it doesn't really matter. But
That's
that
right.
getting the data right is the first step to getting the decision making, particularly when AI is involved, right as well. How close are some of these sort of commodities companies to getting their data right? Or does that have to happen first? Or are they trying to implement artificial intelligence first and then going, oh, our data's not, and then going back? Like, what is that process like?
Yeah. Well, look, I think I can speak from experience here on this. Companies are implementing AI, but the source of their data is often paper-based. So it's based on the whole
Wow.
data. So we don't have full visibility. We know our inventory once a month based on surveyors. I've got a customer in the US who, is a multinational with a lot of inventory across, hundreds of locations. Their reconciliation error between what their books said and what their stock take was $300 million.
But how's that? Let's slow down for a second.
Yeah, go on.
If I was sitting on a trading desk at Goldman Sachs, which I did do,
There
and
you
I
go.
didn't know my position. And again, when I was trained as a trader, like the first thing my boss said to me was position is more important than price. Like if you didn't know your position, you didn't know anything. And
Yep.
you can interchange that with the word inventory. But how can we have a gap of 300 million? If I had a gap of $300 million in my position on my trading desk, like I would have been fired before the words, oh, we're out, you know what I mean? Out of my mouth. How is that possible? In this case, and why is visibility, why are they struggling so hard with getting the visibility? Is there some cohort of people that don't want this to be visible? Is there that much fraud going on?
Look, I think you're asking a nuanced question there, and I
Yeah.
think you probably know some of the answers. Look, to some extent, it's a change process. It's always worked this way. We accept these things. You write these losses in there. So that $300 million error was clearly not acceptable. The company found it to be an issue, and which is why we ended up serving them. But it happens at a smaller quantity and does happen. And people just accept and write these into the losses. A lot of times when you don't know your position, what happens is I might not know that I've got the position to do that trade, but I've still got enough inventory. So what I'll do is borrow from Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
So I've got, $500,000 worth of inventory sitting on site. I got to fulfill $1 million shipment. I'll ship 1 million and worry about that next problem later. And it sorts itself out over time. We've seen oil terminals where, you think that it's got 30 tanks in it and each tank belongs to one customer. But actually, if one is short, they'll use the other customer's product to fill the gap and continually daisy chain around to make sure that everyone gets paid out in the end.
Wow.
And there's literally losses. I've done transactions between traders and bankers, in Singapore, for example, where they're trying to reconcile the inventories and tanks, and there's actual losses every time. The reason why these losses are happening, it's partly because these are analog instruments. So, you measure things at the transfer normally. There's normally an error. Your BOL might say a certain volume, it's a different volume. That recon error is lost. Over time, these errors add up.
Yep.
Then there absolutely is pilferage, and there is fraudulent activity, and so you've got that going on as well. And then you've got mismanagement. Like I described, the terminals who are using each other customers' products to fulfill other products' needs.
Yep.
At some point, there's a screw up, and then the things happen. So we see it happen for these reasons. The industry tolerates it because it's kind of accepted that's just how it always is. But I think you look at any modern terminal being built today, or any modern, inventory where there are sensor capabilities, they will build it in.
So that's the other question I was going to ask you is like, where are we going, right? In other words, are there incentives out there for people not to want to have the terminals be modernized, the shipping instruments to be modernized? And what happens when, because there's no, again, if I'm sitting on a trading desk, I can't take the guy sitting next to me and go like, I don't have enough shares of Toyota to sell this thing short. Can I borrow yours? Like, again, fired immediately. I understand every industry is different. And physical commodities definitely different than digital commodities. But what happens when we get to a place where like the data is actually more efficient? So we know exactly what the data is. We know what our positions are. And we're just talking about oil just because it's easy and it's the thing that most people understand. It's not the only commodity out there, obviously. But it impacts everybody's life. What happens when we get to a point where like that stuff is much more robust and there is less fraud or less Peter stealing from Paul to like make delivery and stuff like that? What happens when the data is like more effective?
Look, I think you get a lot more efficiencies, right?
Yeah.
A lot of planning is based around the fact that there are errors, and so you have headroom to cater for those errors. You know, if I organize a shipment of oil to be sent to my port, I'm going to factor in that, you know, there's a certain chance that there's going to be delays in shipments and logistics. So I'm going to make sure I've got headroom. There's also chances of errors and mismatches and numbers. So you always have a bit more just in case. And so what happens is you have inefficiency in unused capital sitting in inventories, sitting there. So from a pure working capital perspective, you've got capital tied up in the just in case contingency bucket that ends up getting freed up. So what you'll get is more efficiency. And because commodities are fungible, you know, you can tokenize these things. You can actually deal with them differently once you have the sensing capabilities. So you can actually get a lot more efficiency of capital, efficiency of resources, and optimize your operations when you actually have that eyes on. And it's why it's why our customers pay us, because basically the ones that do, they want that visibility so they can make quicker decisions, more accurate decisions, and make the best use of their capital.
How do current events, and we don't have to talk about these current events in particular, but how do current events impact people's desires to start deploying technology to get a better sense of, particularly in a world where, like, you know, I'm just looking at WTI, West Texas Intermediate, goes from like $60 a barrel to over $100 a barrel. And now constraints on delivery are like much bigger than they were, let's just say, and I'm looking at the chart, in February or March. How does that impact people's desire to say, like, you know what, now's the time for me to get more sense oriented, to get more technologically embedded? How does that change things?
It's very helpful for companies like ours, because suddenly boards want to know, how much inventory do we have? Do we understand where it's at? They ask reporting. A lot of our customers in Australia have been, you know, summoned to meet with the ministers in Parliament to talk about safety reserves and what do they have, you know, when there's potential shortages that could, you know, impact operations and production. And so that visibility suddenly turns into, we don't have eyes on, we need more visibility. And so the phones ring off the hook then, because people really want. And so where once upon a time maybe they wouldn't have spent, you know, a couple $100,000 or a couple $1 million in deployment, now they will do it because suddenly that eyes on is important. I can give you a really good case with
Go ahead.
the military action going on right now, for example. Running out of fuel during an operation is critical. And you know, you can imagine what's going on right now. If you were to lose fuel storage locations in a wartime area, and you need to deploy fuel from other locations, you need to know what you've got, and you need to know where it is, and you need to be sure that you can get it. And so if you don't have that sense, and if you don't have that visibility, it's actually a real bottleneck. So times like this really drive that transparency and that need, because you have to be efficient and you have to be accurate.
How sticky is it? I mean, when people sort of implement new stuff during, I'll call it a crisis, you can call it whatever you want, but how sticky are these implementations where, like you said, the phones are ringing off the hook? But if we get WTI back down to like $60 a barrel, if what's going on in the world kind of calms down, which let's hope it does, but if it does, what does that do to people's, again, desire then to keep doing what they were doing and understanding the visibility of the commodities that they have, again, whatever that commodity is? Or does it kind of dissipate because they're like, you know what, now it's not that important. We have access to way more inventory, so we don't really care as much anymore? Or does it just stay sticky where they're like, okay, now we know stuff. We always want to know things. If that makes sense.
It's a bit like that. Imagine if you could only see your bank balance every week, and one day I said to you, hey, you can look at it anytime you want. And then I say, you know, maybe you don't need it anymore.
What's 0 times 0 is what I want to know. But go ahead.
You'll have, now, generally speaking, what happens is once they get access to more information, they start to use it more frequently.
Yeah.
And once you digitize it, you start to integrate into your ERPs and into all your other systems of record, and then it becomes hard to walk it back. So this stuff gets very sticky very quickly.
So that's the other thing I was going to ask you is, like, once you get access to this data, are you seeing people do unique things with it from an analysis standpoint, using artificial intelligence to do it? And are they leaning on you guys as well to make sure that they know how to do that, if that makes sense?
Well, that's where it gets super interesting, right? So we're fortunate in, like, say in Australia, our home market, probably 50% of the diesel fuel that's used in the diesel that's used in mining goes through us. Probably about 90% of all the fuel in rail goes through us. So we have a lot of data. And that data, our customers use that data that they can see, of course, for a lot of their critical decision making. Things like asset maintenance, things like route optimization, things like mine planning. There's a lot of decisions you can make with that data. And so we see some really innovative uses, bringing in machine learning. And I think now people are starting to throw AI at it as well to say, hey, I need to plan how I'm going to distribute fuel across hundreds of miles. What's the best way to organize where I store my fuel, where I move fuel around to optimize my operations? And so a lot of those kind of problems are now being thrown at AI. You can only do that when you have the data.
Yeah.
Likewise, we see some interesting things in the US. We help some of our tier 1 rail customers manage their rail, and they've got to think about, where do I fill my fuel and what grade do I put in? Because depending on the grade of fuel, I pay different emissions taxes depending on different states I travel through.
Right.
So how do I optimize my spot price, fuel, type of fuel, and where I burn it to optimize that? And so once again, once all the data comes in, you can actually throw this at AI. So we see some really interesting use cases now going on with our customers.
So another thing, like, what is the implication on the downstream supply chain, right? Because commodities are never, like, no one buys a commodity and you know what I mean, and eats it. It's not like, something else happens to it after that always, whether it's refined or whether it's put into some other process, or, from oil, like most people don't know, but it's made into plastics and all this other stuff. What is the implication on the supply chain of the lack of visibility for their inventory?
Yeah, look, I think, most of our customers will sign forward contracts, or long-term contracts to procure and ensure some kind of certainty of supply. That's how they do it right now. What that does mean is you're locking in certainty and price, right? Risk to compensate for it. That's what you can trade off when you have more visibility.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear though. You can lock in a long-term price, but you can't lock in certainty on delivery.
No. But what you can
and what normally happens, sorry to interrupt you, but what would happen is, let's say I lock in $60, and again, we're just using West Texas Intermediate. That's not coming from the, like, I get it, but just as a proxy for everything else, even if I could pay that price for it, or if I've locked in that price, if I can't get the inventory, I'm gonna have to pay a much higher price today in an emergency situation to get it. So, like, there is price discovery or price understanding or price certainty, but not delivery certainty. That's the problem. Yeah.
So where you have visibility, the things that help downstream are, if you have transparency. We see that with some customers where they'll let you log in and see their digitized system, so you can see. You might have inventory on consignment, you have inventory on hold there, and so you can see that they can fulfill your requirement. A lot of in the downstream kind of cases, they'll do vendor managed inventory. So, for example, they'll say, we'll take accountability to maintain a certain amount of inventory at your site for you. And by having visible access, so a lot of our customers will provide their suppliers access to our software so they can see how much inventory is sitting on site. And when it goes to a certain level, they'll fill it up. So by doing that, they can actually drive more just-in-time behavior and minimize unnecessary shipments and logistics flows to kind of just optimize that. So that's what it does. It gives you more certainty between the supplier and the buyer to make sure you can optimize that flow, because these are usually long-term relationships, and it's how you manage that. But equally, if I look at our South American or our US customers, being able to go on spot where you can see there's inventory and make a decision now,
right?
That's actually also super interesting. And we're seeing emerging markets where that is happening, where you can see, you can get it now and there's availability, you can procure.
Got it. What is there some sort of sustainability impact of all this stuff too, right? I mean, whenever you're talking about commodities, you could be talking about carbonization or lack of like, is there some sustainability impact on all this, or no?
Well, there is. I mean, ultimately, a lot of jurisdictions are now requiring Scope 1 and Scope 2 reporting.
Yep.
And so with that comes a need to understand how much you've got and where you consumed it. And so whether you're talking about, say, a fuel consuming organization like mining or rail or defense, you need to know what you consume, where, how. And so that transparency and visibility, if you don't digitize it, what you end up doing is you say, you procured $1 billion worth of product and you consumed, 800 million. So you therefore have to kind of account for it somehow, and you have to model it. So, you pay a consultant to come in and do something for you. But if you have the digitized information, then it becomes really simple to produce those reports straight away.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And that in turn lets you optimize it. If you're trying to optimize your emissions to kind of claim carbon credits or have supporting data for it, having that information gives you that capability. And just one more point before I hand to you, provenance is the other one.
What's provenance? What do you
So
mean?
provenance, being able to justify where it came from. So digital fingerprinting or other kinds of supply chain technologies to make sure you understand the provenance. This is probably true for agriculture, where you need to show that this product was made with product that came from that country. Those kinds of challenges become a lot easier when you've got digitization of the entire stream of documentation.
Sure. Are there gaps that you see in the digitization? And by the way, I love the fact that you just said BOL earlier in the recording. Like everybody was going to know that meant bill of lading. In my head, no. I'm smiling because I'm happy. It's just like I know this because my dad's job for most of my life was like importing, whether it was fruit or meat and vegetables globally. So like I just heard bill of lading at the dinner table because he dealt with like some of the biggest shipping companies in the world. But I was just, as soon as you said BOL, my brain went through this like instant search for like, oh, I know what that means kind of feeling. But anyway, are you seeing a bifurcation, sort of success bifurcation between companies in the commodity space that are actually digitizing their operations and those that aren't? And what happens when these companies that aren't doing it, at least initially, try to catch up? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Look, in the world of commodities, there's a lot of places where people don't necessarily want that transparency. So
but why?
Creates problems. So you've got a complexity between the producer, the people that do third-party storage, trader, and the financier, and ultimately the buyer. And so sometimes it is better to not have too much transparency. I'll give you a simple example.
Please.
I'm holding third-party storage of inventory, and customer A and customer B both are holding inventory in my warehouse of a bunch of product. And I need to fulfill an order, and I'm short by, a couple $100,000 worth of product.
Right.
I'll borrow customer B's inventory and ship it. Customer B doesn't know. They won't know till the end of the month. Now, between now and then, I'll sort out customer B by taking from customer C. It'll all work out in the end. Nobody's going to get shortchanged. But I don't want everyone to ask me questions about this.
Yeah. But they must. In other words, if you know this, and if you're saying it out loud on a podcast that tens of thousands of people are going to see, like, are your clients going to call you and just be like, "Hey, David, that thing you said on the podcast with Michael, like, you're really taking our stuff to give to other people, and like, are we company C? Like, how do we know?" if everybody's comfortable with this,
they're not. It's blissful ignorance or willful. So typically, the operational people would understand these. The financiers, insurance don't. They think a tank is a tank, or a warehouse is a warehouse, and so they see it like that. So it keeps it simple. So the moment you give them visibility, the bank's going to be ringing up saying, "Hey, how come the position changed? There's no transactions." And then you've got to explain things, and you're confident that nothing untoward is going on, but it just creates reporting obligations when you do that.
But so this is the other thing I was going to ask you. Like, what is the impact on all of this kind of inventory movement on insurance, on financing? Because look, I worked at Macquarie, not on the bank side, but on the investment bank side. And to be fair, they were a little loosey-goosey with the numbers when I was there. But what's the impact on financing and insurance if, again, is it, what did you call it? Like blissful ignorance, where they're just like, you know what, I don't want to know. As long as I don't have a problem with delivery when it's my turn, I'm okay. Is that the way this works? Because again, the guys and gals that are managing their inventory in a way that's efficient should get better financing than people that aren't, no? Or better insurance rates, yeah? Because they're running less risk, no?
Well, it comes down to whether they've got stated losses ultimately, right? So if they don't, the efficiency is lost on the insurer or the financier. What they're probably more looking at is whose inventory is it, and have they got a balance sheet to support if there's a loss, and have they got insurance for it? So that's what they should be looking at. So where we've done transactions with banks, they're normally financing a party in a third-party storage location, which may be a little bit more dicey from a theft and fraud perspective. That's where they'll want complete visibility, and it does create a pain. So I've worked with banks who've had to say, "Hey, we're used to getting once a month reports.
Right.
The once a month report reconciles with our expectations, and we're good. But now we can see inventory every day. What are you meant to do when the inventory is down by 10%? Do we have to call them every day? It's like a new process. They're used to a once a month process.
Yeah.
See stuff, we have to do something about it. And what do we do about that?" And so it does create, most banks are unaware that this kind of thing happens.
Are they really though? In 2026, they're unaware because
I
here's the
can
thing.
promise you.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're misstating this. That's my way of expressing surprise.
Yeah.
Again, because when I go back and look at like stock positions or bond positions or even traded commodity positions at a firm like Goldman Sachs or even at a hedge fund, they were all put into what we called separate accounts. And I think it's in the name.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I said, like the positions that were associated with company A were just associated with company A. They had nothing to do with company B. And you couldn't just like pirate off of one guy's stuff to give it to another guy's stuff, even if at the end of the day it all worked out. So it's just not surprising to me, but it's just interesting to me that there's an entire industry out there where people are just like, we'll figure it out on March 31st or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
It's the operations teams and banks or traders 100% know this goes on, but most of the financiers see it exactly the way you describe it. That's my asset. It's there. It's not moving. I get a monthly report saying it's still there. We are good, and that's enough from a point of due diligence. And look, 99.9% of the time, it all works itself out. So it's okay. But it does happen, and it's a interesting thing because the world of commodities is just messy. We've worked with the warehouses who are storing inventories. You got to move your inventory from point A to point B to make space, to move things around. Now, if you had cameras, we often get asked the question, can we put cameras on to monitor our inventory? We got copper concentrate sitting in a dock or in a warehouse at a port. Can we monitor it with LiDARs or cameras? Yes, you can. But the warehouse is not going to want to have to explain to you every time they move your stuff why they did it, because that would be a new process for them.
But what does that do to your ability to do business then, right? Because part of this idea is the visibility and the sort of countability and the accountability of where all this inventory is. Do you know what I mean? There is a cohort out there of people who are just like, what you don't know won't hurt you kind of thing.
What we have found is we offer the most value to the producer, the person. If the person owns title and it's their inventory, you want to know what you've got. You need to know your position. So if I'm BHP Billiton or if I'm Nutrien, I need to know what I've got, and I need to know I can trade it. And so they tend to be our customers. They want to know.
They have to know.
They have to know. And so that's where we would, mostly serve. Where banks and insurers want to come in, it's often a third party is requesting invisibility. There's a bit of a, do we really need to do this? And then the Treasury will say, yes, we do. And so then they'll do it. But it's not their desired thing to provide that visibility, not because they're doing anything fraudulent, because they're mainly worried that there'll be unnecessary additional overheads.
Yeah, unnecessary additional work and sort of calculations that they need to make. There's got to be a big benefit for you guys to be in Australia just based on the structure of the Australian economy when it comes to commodities, no?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic for us. Obviously, Australia being a big mining commodities country, it's been great for us. And a lot of, good tech comes from here. But, I think the US is a great market. Canada is a great market. And some of the South American markets are also quite large for us. So it's helpful. Like in Australia, we're all ag and mining, right? That's a large part of our commodities. And so it's natural. A lot of tech comes out of here.
Again, when I was working at Macquarie, this was one of the things that I learned about Australia. Coking coal was something we talked about a lot. Like I didn't even know what that was before I started working there. But yeah, all interesting stuff.
What part of Macquarie were you in?
So I was running the portfolio trading desk on the equity side in Tokyo, but that business was essentially running all of portfolio trading, so equity portfolio trading in APAC.
Yeah.
So literally all the way from New Zealand and Australia. I sat in Japan, but that included the Hong Kong business and everything west of that to India too. So yeah.
Look, I love the world of commodities. It's frightfully complicated and convoluted, but it's so critical. And so you realize it's amazing things work at all.
Yeah. It is. Okay, David, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did.
Absolutely. It's good to meet you. Thanks for your time.
Very nice to meet you as well. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye for now.